You're like a workhorse, easy to ride. My wife mocked me, but she never saw this coming. You won't believe what happened to me. Imagine working your butt off for over a decade, sacrificing everything for the woman you loved, only to find out she was planning to leave you for someone richer. Sounds like a bad dream, right? Well, this nightmare became my reality. And what happened next will shock you. Stay tuned, because the tables are about to turn in ways you can't even imagine. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. I never thought I'd end up here sitting in a courtroom, the walls closing in, the air thick with tension. It wasn't supposed to be like this. When I first met Vanessa, I was convinced I had found my soulmate. She was everything I'd ever dreamed of: beautiful, intelligent, charismatic. We were a perfect match, or so I thought. Over the years, I worked harder than I ever imagined I could, all to build a life for us. 2 jobs, 80-hour weeks, sleepless nights. All for her. For us. I believed in our future together. I believed in love. But now, as I sat in that courtroom, watching her play her part, I knew the truth. She had never seen me the way I saw her. She had never been in love with me the way I was with her. She had used me. And now, she was about to walk away with everything I'd worked for, everything we had built together. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. There were moments, little things, that didn't sit right. But I was too focused on keeping up with her expectations, her lavish dreams. She wanted luxury, recognition, a life of indulgence, and I gave it to her. Designer handbags, a downtown loft with a view of the skyline, vacations to places I never had time to enjoy because I was too busy working to pay for them. I thought it was worth it. I thought that if I just sacrificed a little more, worked a little harder, I could make her happy. I convinced myself that love meant sacrifice. But love shouldn't feel like a prison. It shouldn't feel like drowning in the expectation of someone else's dreams. It was during one of those sleepless nights that I first realized something had changed. Vanessa was in the other room, scrolling through her phone, completely detached from the world around her. We hadn't had a real conversation in months. It used to be easy long talks late into the night, laughing until we couldn't breathe. But now, it was like I didn't even exist. When I walked into the room, she didn't even look up. I tried to talk to her, tried to reconnect, but it felt like I was speaking to a wall. She would give me short answers, distracted, like she was somewhere else. I thought maybe it was just the stress of our lives, of everything going on. Maybe we needed a vacation, a break. So, I planned one. Something special for our anniversary. I wanted to remind her of the love we once had. But when I told her about it, her response was flat. "That's it?" she asked, barely looking up from her phone. I laughed it off, tried to brush it off as nothing. But deep down, I knew. Something was wrong. Then came the Saturday morning when I woke up alone. The side of the bed where she should have been was cold, untouched. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was out with friends. But when she came home hours later, her story didn't add up. She said she had stayed at a friend's place, but the way she said it, too casual, too rehearsed, set off alarm bells. But I didn't press her. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, the one who questions every move, every word. So, I let it go. But things kept changing. She started going out more, dressing up in ways she never did for me. It wasn't the kind of dressing up I was used to, the kind she'd do when we'd go out for a date. No, this was different. She would get dressed up for girls' night, but she stopped inviting me. When I asked to join, she waved me off like I was some inconvenience. "You wouldn't enjoy it," she'd say, dismissively. But wasn't I supposed to be part of her life? Wasn't that what marriage was? I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. I told myself it was just a phase. That we were both working too hard. That we just needed a little time to reconnect. I kept making excuses. But then I started noticing the little lies. The missed calls. The late nights. The days when she'd come home smelling of perfume I hadn't bought her, acting like everything was normal. And I kept telling myself it was fine. But it wasn't. And I knew that deep down. The worst came when I decided to surprise her one day, take her to lunch, just the two of us. I thought it would be a nice change. But when I walked into our apartment, she wasn't there. I tried calling her, but once again, it went straight to voicemail. Hours passed before she finally came home, looking perfect, as if she hadn't been gone all day. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. She smiled and said, "Just brunch with Claire." But I had already called Claire that morning, and Claire told me she hadn't seen Vanessa in weeks. I should have known then, but I didn't say anything. I just stood there, feeling like a fool. And then came the final blow. Our 7th anniversary. I had planned everything: dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date, a weekend getaway in the mountains. I spent months saving for it, working extra hours. It was supposed to be perfect. But when I told her, she shrugged. "That's it?" she said, her voice flat. I couldn't believe it. I had put everything I had into making her happy, and she couldn't even pretend to care. That was the moment I knew. That was the moment I realized she didn't love me the way I loved her. But it wasn't until the hotel receipt appeared that everything fell apart. A receipt for a luxury hotel suite. One that I had never booked. One that was clearly meant for two. The pieces all clicked together. The lies, the distance, the betrayal. Vanessa had been cheating on me, and she hadn't even bothered to hide it. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But there it was. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the receipt, feeling like my world was crumbling around me. I thought about all the years I had spent working for her, sacrificing my time, my energy, my life, all for someone who had been planning her escape the entire time. The anger was there, but so was something else. Something colder. I wasn't just going to let her walk away from this. Not without consequences. I could feel the weight of the truth sinking in like a stone. That damn hotel receipt. It was like a punch to the gut that I couldn't shake off, no matter how hard I tried. Vanessa was out there living a life I knew nothing about. A life where I wasn't even part of the equation anymore. It was the kind of realization that felt like the ground beneath me was slipping away, leaving me stranded in the dark. But I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. I had been a fool for too long, justifying her actions, making excuses for the distance, pretending that everything was okay. No more. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt this betrayed, this hollow. The anger came fast, like a fire igniting in my chest. But there was something colder. Something darker bubbling up inside me too. It wasn't just about the affair, the lies, or the deceit anymore. It was about the years I had wasted. The sacrifices. The relentless hours at work. The sleepless nights. The endless promises I'd made to myself that things would get better. That Vanessa would see how hard I was trying. That she would appreciate it. But she didn't. She hadn't. And now, I was left picking up the pieces of a life I had given everything for, while she walked away with no shame, no remorse, and no consequence. I couldn't just let her get away with it. I wasn't going to roll over like I had before. Not now. Not after everything I had learned. There was a part of me that wanted to storm in and confront her, shout at her, make her feel the weight of what she had done. But I knew that wouldn't work. I wasn't the emotional wreck I had been a few months ago. This time, I was going to handle this differently. I had spent too many years running on autopilot, too many years not questioning what I should have been questioning. But now I saw the truth. Vanessa wasn't just cheating on me. She had been using me. She had been taking everything I had to offer: my love, my energy, my money, and throwing it away for someone else. And the worst part? She didn't even care enough to hide it. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. Not this time. I started by doing something I should have done years ago. I took control of my own life. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. So, I started looking into everything. Our finances. Every transaction. Every dollar she had spent without telling me. She had always been the one to handle the bills, the one to take care of the details while I focused on making sure we had everything we needed. I trusted her. But I was wrong too. She had been draining our accounts, funneling money into secret accounts I didn't know about, and using that money for luxury gifts, expensive trips, and God knows what else. I was furious when I saw the bank statements. Furious and disgusted. I had worked my ass off for everything we had, and she had been siphoning off the top of it like it was nothing. But I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had worked for and walk away like it was nothing. I knew I needed to act fast. I couldn't just let her keep doing whatever she wanted, living her double life with no consequences. So, I started gathering evidence. Every little piece of proof I could find. I went through our bank statements, our credit card bills, every single document that might give me the ammunition I needed. I started making calls, checking up on things she thought I wouldn't notice. And it didn't take long before I found something. It was a message. A text. From Jonathan. I didn't know who he was at first, but it didn't take long to find out. She had been talking about him constantly on her phone, in the middle of the night, texting while I was lying in bed beside her. It had always felt like there was something off about it, but I never pressed her. I didn't want to look paranoid. I didn't want to accuse her of anything without proof. But now I had the proof. I had enough to take this to the next level. I knew I needed help. This wasn't something I could handle on my own. So, I called Claire. She was the best in the business, tough, smart, and ruthless. If anyone could help me get what I deserved, it was her. We met in her office the next day. I laid everything out on the table. The bank records, the hotel receipts, the text messages. And as she listened, her eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a small, knowing smile. "She's going to regret underestimating you," Claire said, and I could feel a sense of calm settle over me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't alone in this. I had a plan. We spent the next few weeks preparing for the inevitable. Claire got to work, digging into Vanessa's financials, pulling apart every transaction, every account, and exposing the web of lies Vanessa had built around me. The truth was uglier than I could have imagined. Vanessa had been playing me for a fool. She had taken everything I had given her, and used it to fuel her affair, her fantasy life with Jonathan. And I had no idea. Not until it was too late. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to let her walk into that courtroom and pretend like she hadn't been the one who tore our marriage apart. The day the divorce papers were served to Vanessa was the first victory. She didn't see it coming. I didn't want to humiliate her, but I wanted her to know that I wasn't going to roll over and let her have everything. I had every right to fight back, and that's exactly what I was going to do. Vanessa was having brunch with her friends when the server handed her the envelope. Witnesses said her face went pale. Her hands were shaking as she read the papers. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that I hadn't in years: power. She came home that night, furious. "Are you kidding me?" she yelled, slamming the door behind her. "You had me served in public?" She threw the papers down onto the coffee table, her face twisted in rage. But I didn't back down. I sat there, calm, collected, watching her lose control. "Seemed fitting," I said, my voice steady. "Since you like an audience so much." She was livid. She threw the papers down on the table and glared at me. "You think this scares me? You think you're going to win?" I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my knees. "I don't need to win, Vanessa. I just need you to lose." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You don't have the guts for this." I smirked, leaning back in the chair. "That's where you're wrong." And that was just the beginning. The trial was a nightmare for her. Every lie, every mistake, every shady financial transaction was exposed in front of the judge. Claire didn't miss a thing. She shredded every excuse Vanessa tried to make. And when we pulled out the proof of Vanessa's affair, when the court saw the hotel receipts, the wire transfers to Jonathan, and the text messages where she mocked me, I saw her confidence crack. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore, it was about something more: justice. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control again. But the best part was still to come. Vanessa had spent so much time making me out to be the bad guy, the one who wasn't good enough for her, the one who wasn't ambitious enough, rich enough, or successful enough. But when I stepped up to the stand, when I looked the judge in the eye, I didn't need to say much. The evidence spoke for itself. And as I stood there, knowing that this was finally happening, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This was my turn. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Vanessa thought she could get away with everything: her lies, her cheating, her manipulation. But I was done being the fool. This was about more than just getting what I deserved. It was about standing up for myself. It was about showing Vanessa, and anyone else, that I wasn't someone you could just walk all over. I had waited for this moment for so long. And now that it was finally here, I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. "Wait, what do you think will happen next?" I was caught completely off guard by what she did, but little did she know, I had my own plan. "Will I get the revenge I deserve?" Or will she manage to pull the strings once again? Comment 1 if you think I should expose her in court. Comment 2 if you think I should hit her where it really hurts her reputation. Let me know your thoughts. I want to hear from you. The moment I stepped into Claire's office, I could feel the gravity of everything I had been through pressing down on me. The weight of Vanessa's betrayal, the exhaustion from months of sleepless nights, and the rage that had built up inside me. But there was something else too, hope. For the first time, I wasn't alone in this fight. Claire was my ally, and the fire in her eyes told me she wasn't going to let Vanessa get away with this. She didn't waste any time. She knew exactly how to handle this situation, and it was obvious right from the start that this wasn't going to be like the other times. This wasn't going to be me folding under pressure. No, this time, I was going to fight back. I sat across from her, hands clenched, trying to control the anger that was bubbling just below the surface. I couldn't believe what Vanessa had done. The lies. The manipulation. The way she had spent years making me feel like I was the problem, while she was off building a life with someone else. I had spent years convincing myself that if I just worked harder, if I just loved her more, things would get better. But I had been wrong. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about us. She cared about herself. Claire wasted no time in getting to work. She pulled up the bank statements, the credit card records, and everything else we needed to take Vanessa down. As she sifted through the pages, her eyes narrowed, and I could feel the tension in the room building. She's been siphoning off money for months, Claire said, her voice calm but sharp. She's been setting herself up for this divorce, planning her escape, draining everything she can get her hands on before it all blows up. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. I had suspected something was off, but seeing it all laid out in black and white was a different kind of gut punch. Vanessa had been using our money to fuel her affair, buying gifts for Jonathan, taking trips I never knew about, and living a life I didn't even recognize. And all this time, I had been working myself to the bone, trying to keep us afloat, thinking I was doing the right thing. But it was all a lie. Every single thing she had told me, every promise, every I love you, all of it had been a game to her. I looked at Claire, the reality of the situation sinking in. What do we do now? I asked. Claire's lips curled into a small smile. Now, we take the gloves off. She was ready. She had been ready for this moment long before I had even walked through the door. She knew exactly what had to be done, and I wasn't going to stand in her way. We're going to expose her, Claire said, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. Every lie, every dollar she's stolen. We're going to make sure she pays for what she's done. The next few weeks were a blur of legal motions, calls, and strategizing. I had never been through anything like this before. The pressure, the feeling of the walls closing in, was suffocating. But with Claire's guidance, I began to realize that this wasn't just about winning in court. This was about reclaiming my life, reclaiming my dignity, and making sure that Vanessa understood that I wasn't the man she could push around anymore. When the court date finally came, I was ready. I had never felt more prepared, even though the nerves still ate at me. I knew what was at stake, and I wasn't about to let her walk out of that courtroom unscathed. We walked into the courtroom, and I could see the look on Vanessa's face, smug, confident, like she had it all figured out. She had no idea what was coming. As the trial began, Claire took control. She laid out every piece of evidence methodically, showing how Vanessa had been living this double life while using my hard-earned money to fund it. The bank records, the hotel receipts, the charges to credit cards that didn't make sense. Every lie she had told came crashing down around her, and with each piece of evidence Claire presented, I could see Vanessa's facade cracking. The best part? When Claire dropped the bombshell. We had known about Vanessa's affair, but the records tied it all together. The financial records were irrefutable. They showed exactly how Vanessa had used my money to bankroll her relationship with Jonathan. And when those records hit the judge's desk, I saw the look on Vanessa's face shift from confidence to panic. It was like watching her world crumble in slow motion. I sat back, watching as Claire tore down everything Vanessa had built. I didn't need to say a word. Claire had already done the work for me. All I had to do was watch as Vanessa's perfect little world came crashing down. She had spent so long manipulating me, making me think I wasn't enough, that I wasn't doing enough. But now she was the one exposed. And when the judge called for a recess, I watched as Vanessa stormed out of the room, her heels clicking on the tile floor like a metronome of defeat. She had lost. And I hadn't even had to raise my voice. Later that night, after the trial had ended for the day, Vanessa called me. I let the phone ring for a few seconds before I picked up. "What do you want, Vanessa?" I asked, my voice calm, controlled. Her voice was different this time. Not the smug, self-assured tone she usually had. No, this time she was desperate. "We don't have to do this in court, Marcus," she said, almost pleading. "We can figure something out." I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch between us for a moment. I wanted to make her sweat, just like she had made me sweat for all those years. "Oh, now you want to figure something out. You didn't seem so interested in negotiating when you were spending my money on your boyfriend." Her breath hitched on the other end of the line, and I knew then that she finally understood. The tables had turned. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. I couldn't help but laugh. "No, you didn't make a mistake, Vanessa. You made a choice. And now you get to live with it." The line went silent for a moment before she hung up. And as I sat there, listening to the dead silence of the room, I realized something. This was it. I was done being the victim. I was done letting her control my life. This was my time to fight back, and I was going to make sure she knew it. The day Vanessa received the divorce papers, I felt a sense of calm wash over me that I hadn't known in months. The rage, the heartbreak, the humiliation, they were all still there, but now, there was something else. Something stronger. Justice. I had spent years being the one who did all the work, the one who kept quiet, the one who sacrificed everything for her. But today was my turn. She thought she had me cornered. She thought she could just walk away, taking everything we had built together without a second thought. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Claire was a genius. I had to admit, I never thought I would be the type of guy who could get the best of someone like Vanessa. She had always been so confident, so convincing. She had this way of making everything seem like my fault, like I was the one who wasn't doing enough. But Claire? She knew how to break down every single one of Vanessa's lies. Every last bit of manipulation. When I walked into Claire's office that day, we were ready. The bank statements, the receipts, the credit card records, it was all laid out. And as I sat there, watching Claire go through everything, it became clear. Vanessa had been playing me for years. All those late nights at work, all those times I came home exhausted, thinking I was doing the right thing for her. For us. They had all been wasted. Vanessa hadn't cared about me. She cared about herself. She cared about the life I gave her, the money, the luxury. But she didn't care about the man who worked himself into the ground to provide it. Claire didn't waste any time. "She's been siphoning money for months," she said, tapping the papers with a pen. "Moving things around, setting herself up for this divorce. She knew exactly what she was doing. And then, she showed me something that made my blood run cold. There it was, clear as day. Vanessa had been spending money on things I had never known about: trips, gifts, hotel stays. Money that should have been ours, money I had worked my ass off for, had been funneled into someone else's pockets. Someone who wasn't me, Jonathan, her lover. The guy she thought would give her everything. I couldn't. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. I had spent so long convincing myself that things would get better, that this was just a phase, that the woman I had married wasn't capable of betraying me like this. But the evidence was there. And as Claire went over everything with me, I started to realize that Vanessa wasn't just having an affair. She had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Preparing to leave me with nothing while she took everything I had given her. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her have the last word. Not now. Not after everything I had done for her. The trial came next. I walked into that courtroom with a sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one in the dark. I wasn't the one being manipulated. I had the truth on my side, and I was ready to make sure everyone knew it. Vanessa, on the other hand, walked in like she had won already. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She wore that smug look on her face, the one that had made me question myself for so many years. But today, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Claire was a force. The moment the trial began, she took control. Every lie, every single one of Vanessa's manipulations, came crashing down. Claire started with the bank records showing how Vanessa had been draining our joint accounts, moving money into a private account, buying things for Jonathan, while I had been working myself into the ground. Vanessa's lawyer tried to object, tried to make it seem like it was all a mistake. But the evidence was clear. The receipts, the transfers, the credit card charges. Everything painted a picture of exactly what Vanessa had been doing. And with every piece of evidence Claire presented, I saw Vanessa's face change. That smug look faded. She started to realize that she was losing. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't been sure of until then. I wasn't powerless anymore. The turning point came when Claire dropped the bombshell. She brought out the hotel receipts. The ones that proved Vanessa had been spending money at luxury hotels, booking suites, and staying there with Jonathan. When those documents hit the table, the courtroom fell silent. Vanessa's face turned white. I could see her trying to hold it together, but it was too late. The truth was out. For the first time in the entire trial, Vanessa looked unsure of herself. She wasn't the confident woman who had walked in with her head held high. No. Now, she was the one on the defensive. She had no idea how to respond. And that, right there, was when I knew I had her. When the judge called for a recess, I watched as Vanessa stormed out of the room, her heels clicking angrily against the tile floor. She was unraveling. And I was just getting started. Later that night, after the court had adjourned, I got a call from Vanessa. Her voice was different. It wasn't the confident, cold tone she used to have. This time, she sounded desperate. She wanted to talk. She wanted to fix things. But I knew better. I knew it was too late for apologies. She had made her choice. And now, she was going to pay for it. I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. I could feel my pulse quicken as I spoke. No, Vanessa. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, and now you get to live with it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she hung up. And in that moment, I knew this was the beginning of the end for her. Vanessa had thought she could just take everything and walk away. But she had underestimated me. She had underestimated the power of the truth. And now, I was the one who held all the cards. The trial was everything I had prepared for, and more. When I first walked into that courtroom, I was filled with this strange mix of nerves and adrenaline. It felt like every part of me was on high alert, like I was finally ready to face what had been looming over me for months. But there was something else too, a sense of justice that burned bright inside me. I had spent so long letting Vanessa control the narrative, pretending I wasn't the victim of a massive betrayal. But now it was my turn. The truth was finally coming out, and I wasn't going to back down. Vanessa had her lawyer by her side, looking sharp as ever, but I could tell there was something different about the way she walked into that room. The smugness, the arrogance, the feeling that she was untouchable, all of it had been replaced with something far less confident. She knew the walls were closing in on her. She knew she wasn't getting away with this. And as I watched her, I felt this strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. The game was on, and for once, I wasn't playing by her rules. Claire took control the moment the trial began. I didn't have to worry about a thing. She laid out everything methodically, strategically, piece by piece. The bank statements, the credit card charges, the hotel receipts, everything Vanessa had done to cover her tracks, every lie she had told, was now laid bare for everyone to see. And with each piece of evidence Claire presented, Vanessa's face grew paler. Her eyes darted around the room, trying to figure out how to salvage what was left. But she couldn't. Not this time. The truth had its claws in her, and there was no escape. But the real moment of reckoning came when Claire pulled out the receipts from those luxury hotel stays, receipts that tied Vanessa and Jonathan together in a way that couldn't be ignored. The court fell silent. Even Vanessa's lawyer seemed to lose some of his confidence. And that's when I saw the small crack in Vanessa's armor. For the first time, she wasn't the confident, cold woman who had been running this show. She wasn't the one pulling the strings anymore. No, now she was the one on the defensive. And I could see the fear in her eyes. The fear of losing everything she had worked so hard to hide. As Claire presented each new piece of evidence, I couldn't help but think about all the times Vanessa had made me feel small. Insignificant, like I wasn't enough. All those years of working my ass off, trying to make her happy, trying to make a life for us, and all the while, She had been plotting her escape with someone else. She hadn't even cared to hide it. She had taken everything I had given her, and used it for her own selfish desires. The house, the vacations, the designer bags all paid for with my blood, sweat, and tears. But now, in front of that judge, the world would finally see her for what she really was. I watched Vanessa's face closely, waiting for her to try and explain her way out of this. But there was nothing left for her to say. She was trapped. And when Claire presented the bank records showing how Vanessa had been siphoning off money for months, it was clear Vanessa had been planning her escape for a long time. She had been preparing to walk away with everything, leaving me with nothing. But now, the tables had turned, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with it all. The judge looked over the evidence, his face growing more serious with each page he turned. "Mrs. Carter," he said, looking directly at Vanessa, "do you have anything to say about these allegations?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her perfectly styled hair falling slightly out of place as she tried to keep it together. But it was clear she was losing control. The confidence she had walked into that courtroom with was completely gone. And now, I could see it. The realization that she had underestimated me. She had thought she could get away with everything, that she could walk away scot-free. But the truth had a way of catching up with you, no matter how hard you tried to hide. As the trial continued, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This wasn't just about getting revenge on Vanessa for what she had done to me. It wasn't just about winning in court. It was about taking back my life. It was about reclaiming my dignity and showing her that I wasn't the man she thought I was. I wasn't the man who would just roll over and let her take everything. No, I was the man who was going to stand up and fight for what was mine. As the judge called for a break, I saw Vanessa storm out of the room, her heels clicking furiously on the tile floor. She was angry, no, she was terrified. And I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. She had spent so long playing the victim, playing the part of the wronged wife. But now the truth was out. And it was no longer her story to tell. I stayed in the courtroom for a few minutes after she left, letting the reality of it all sink in. This wasn't just a victory in court, it was a victory over everything Vanessa had tried to make me feel. It was a victory over the years of manipulation, over the lies, over the betrayal. And as I stood there, watching the empty seat where Vanessa had just been, I realized that I wasn't the one who had lost. I was the one who had won. The moment the judge called for a recess, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me. Vanessa stormed out of the room, heels clicking on the cold tile floor like a drumbeat to the rhythm of her crumbling confidence. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of everything settle in. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment where the truth finally came to light. And everything Vanessa had worked so hard to hide came crashing down. I wasn't going to let her win. Not after everything she had put me through. I glanced around the courtroom, taking a deep breath, trying to shake the adrenaline that was coursing through my veins. The truth was out there now, exposed for everyone to see. And there was no going back for Vanessa. I had spent so long in the shadows of our marriage, trying to fix things, trying to make her happy, all the while she was planning her escape. But now the tables had turned. I wasn't the one running on fumes anymore. She was. When the trial resumed, the atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't just about the evidence anymore, it was about control, power. Vanessa was used to being in control. She was used to being the one who called the shots, who got what she wanted. But now she was the one on the defensive, and I could see it. The way her eyes flickered nervously, the way she shifted in her seat. She was no longer the confident, poised woman who had waltzed into the courtroom with that smug look on her face. She was the one who had something to lose now. And for the first time, I wasn't the one who was afraid. Claire was a machine. She tore apart every excuse Vanessa tried to make. Every time her lawyer stood up and tried to spin some new lie, Claire was right there, countering it with undeniable proof. The bank statements, the wire transfers, the hotel receipts, each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of Vanessa's carefully constructed facade. And with every blow, Vanessa looked more and more like a deer caught in the headlights. Her composure was slipping. She was starting to crack, and I could see it in her eyes. She knew she was losing. But the real turning point came when Claire pulled out the final piece of evidence, the text messages between Vanessa and Jonathan. I could feel my heart rate pick up as Claire read the messages aloud in the courtroom. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about everything Vanessa had tried to keep hidden from me. The lies. The manipulation. The way she had played both of us against each other for her own gain. And when the judge's eyes flickered toward Vanessa, I saw it. The realization that she had been caught. There was no getting out of this. I could feel the tide turning. It was like watching a tidal wave coming for someone who thought they were safe on dry land. Vanessa tried to maintain her calm exterior, but I could see the cracks forming. She wasn't the strong, untouchable woman. She had always wanted me to believe she was. She was just a woman who had gotten too greedy, too selfish, and now she was paying the price for it. As the judge called for another break, I saw her make a beeline for the door, her face flushed with anger. The humiliation was written all over her. She had spent years tearing me down, making me believe that I was the one who wasn't good enough. But now, she was the one on the losing side. And I wasn't going to let her off the hook. I stood up slowly, taking my time to leave the courtroom. I wasn't in a rush. This wasn't about getting out of there as quickly as possible. This was about savoring the moment where I had taken back control of my life. For the first time, I felt like I was finally free. And as I walked out of the courtroom, I knew something else too. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was a battle for my future. And Vanessa, she had lost. She had made the mistake of underestimating me, of thinking she could control everything. But she had forgotten one thing, the one thing that had made me stronger than she ever realized. I wasn't the man she thought I was. I was better. And now, I was going to prove it. The day the verdict came down, I could barely sit still. My hands were clenched, my jaw tight, but there was this quiet storm building inside me. I had already won, in a way. Vanessa's world had unraveled piece by piece over the course of the trial, and it was clear to everyone in that courtroom that she wasn't going to walk away unscathed. But hearing the final words, hearing the judge's decision, would be the moment that truly sealed it. And as I sat there, waiting for the judge to speak, a small, almost bitter smile tugged at the corner of my lips. The fight had been long, brutal, and exhausting, but it was all coming to an end. And in the end, Vanessa wouldn't be the one holding all the cards. No, that was going to be me. I glanced at Vanessa as she sat there beside her lawyer, her perfect, stoic mask in place. But I could see the cracks now. The confidence she had walked in with was gone. Her eyes were darting around the room, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. She knew what was coming. She could feel it. The way everything she had worked so hard to hide was being ripped away. The game was over. I wasn't the one she could control anymore. The judge's voice cut through the silence, stern and final. "Mr. Carter," he said, his gaze shifting to me. "The evidence in this case is clear. The financial misconduct, the lies, the deceit, it all points to one thing. Miss S. Carter's actions were intentional and calculated. It is evident that she was using marital assets to fund an extramarital relationship. And this behavior will not be tolerated." My heart was pounding in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I could hear the judge's words echo in my head, and it felt like a weight was being lifted off my shoulders. Justice was finally being served. I couldn't help but glance at Vanessa, her face now pale, her mouth pressed tight, her breath shallow. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't thought she would be the one to lose. But there it was, her worst nightmare unfolding right in front of her. Every lie she had told, every time she had tried to manipulate me, it had all come crashing down. And now, she was the one paying the price. The judge continued, outlining the division of assets, his voice unwavering. He spoke of the financial damages Vanessa would have to pay, the consequences of her actions. And as I sat there listening, it felt surreal. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a reckoning. For so long, Vanessa had treated me like I was the one who was beneath her, like I was the one who had no power. But now, she was the one being stripped of everything. Her status, her reputation, the life she had taken for granted, all of it was crumbling, piece by piece. I had been the one she thought was weak, the one she could walk all over. But now, I was the one standing tall, the one who had finally taken back control. The judge's gavel came down with a finality that hit me like a thunderclap. "This court rules in favor of Mr. Carter," he said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "The evidence is clear, and the damages will be enforced accordingly. Miss S. Carter is hereby ordered to pay restitution for the financial misconduct and the emotional distress caused by her actions." I exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. This was it. Vanessa had lost. And I had won. As the courtroom began to empty out, I couldn't help but feel this strange mix of relief and pride. I had fought for what was mine, and I had come out victorious. But there was no sense of triumph in the way I felt. It wasn't about revenge, at least not the way I thought it would be. No, it was about reclaiming my life, reclaiming my dignity. For so long, I had let Vanessa define who I was, what I was worth. But now, I knew better. I had fought back, and I had won. Vanessa walked out of the courtroom, her shoulders stiff, her eyes darting around nervously, trying to hold on to the last bit of pride she had left. I watched her for a moment, but I didn't feel anything. Not sadness, not anger, just nothing. She was a ghost of the woman I once loved. The woman who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I wasn't the same man I had been when all of this started. I had learned something about myself, something I hadn't known I was capable of. I had learned that even in the face of the worst betrayal, I could stand tall. And as I walked out of that courtroom, the weight of it all finally lifting off my shoulders, I knew that this was just the beginning. My life was mine again, and nothing, not even Vanessa, could take that away from me. The days that followed the trial felt like a blur, a strange mixture of numbness and disbelief. As I walked out of the courthouse, there was no celebratory feeling in the air. I didn't feel the triumph I thought I would. The verdict had been delivered, and I had won. But the weight of everything that had led up to that moment was still there, hanging over me. I had been through hell, and for what? For justice? Maybe. But it felt hollow. Vanessa had finally been exposed for what she truly was. The lies, the deceit, the manipulation, everything came to light in that courtroom. I had spent so long being the one who believed in her, who trusted her, who thought we were building something real together. I had convinced myself that if I just worked harder, sacrificed more, she would see how much I loved her. But she never did. She had used me, drained me of everything I had to offer, until there was nothing left but an empty shell of a man, one who had been too blind to see the truth. And even now, after everything, I couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. When I got back to the apartment that night, it was like stepping into a foreign place. The silence felt too loud. It was a space that had once been filled with her presence, her things, her demands. Now it was just mine, and yet, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I was looking at the remnants of a life that was no longer mine. I sat down on the couch, the weight of the moment sinking in. I wasn't the man I had been when this whole mess started. That person, he was gone. The naive, hopeful guy who thought he could fix everything, that if he just tried harder, worked harder, he could make it all better. No, that man was gone. I had fought for myself in that courtroom, and I had won. But now, in the aftermath, it felt like a fight. I wasn't sure I had won. There was no elation, no joy in seeing Vanessa squirm under the weight of her lies. There was only a quiet realization that I had lost something far bigger than money or property. It was only after a long, sleepless night that I realized the full extent of what had happened. I had lost the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted. But what I had gained was something I hadn't expected: freedom. The freedom to rebuild my life without her in it. The freedom to finally live for myself. The freedom to move on. And that was something no court ruling could ever give me. It wasn't about the house, or the money, or the revenge. It was about taking my life back. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking my train of thought. I glanced at it, expecting to see an email or a message from someone. But no, it was Vanessa. Her name flashed on the screen, and for a second, I almost let it ring out. But then, I picked it up. "Hello," I said, my voice flat. "Marcus," she said, her voice softer than I had heard it in weeks. "We need to talk." I could feel the weight of those words hanging in the air between us. Talk? About what? The lies she had told? The betrayal she had inflicted on me? The years I had spent working myself into the ground for her, while she played me for a fool? I wanted to hang up, to tell her I was done. But I didn't. I don't know if there's anything left to say, I replied, keeping my voice even. The court said everything that needed to be said. I made a mistake, Marcus, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I wasn't thinking. I was caught up in everything. A laugh escaped me, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was bitter. A mistake? Vanessa, this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. A long series of choices. And now? I'm left picking up the pieces. There was silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, her words hanging in the air, but I wasn't interested in her apologies anymore. I wasn't interested in her excuses. I wasn't interested in anything she had to say. You've taken everything from me, I said, my voice low. But I'm not going to let you take my future. Not anymore. She started, but I cut her off. No, I said firmly. You don't get to do this. Not now. Not after everything. I'm done, Vanessa. I've moved on. I ended the call. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of finality. I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. She had stolen enough from me, my time, my energy, my heart, but no more. It was over. I was done. As I sat there in the silence of my apartment, I realized something else. I had survived. I had survived the heartbreak, the betrayal, and the lies. And now, I was free. Free to rebuild, free to start over. It wasn't the ending I had imagined, but it was the one I needed. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe again. The days after the trial felt surreal. Everything had been leading up to that moment, the truth finally coming to light. Vanessa getting her comeuppance, but now that it was over, I couldn't shake this strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't triumph or relief, no, it was more like waking up from a nightmare, and realizing the damage had already been done. The damage wasn't just to me, or to Vanessa. It was to the life I thought we had built together. But now, I was walking away from it all. The question was, what was I walking toward? I spent the next few weeks trying to figure that out. At first, I threw myself into work, hoping that it would help numb the emptiness that had settled in. I threw myself into projects I'd pushed aside for years, buried myself in emails, meetings, and deadlines, telling myself I was doing it for my future. But even with the late nights and the long hours, the truth kept creeping in. Like a shadow at the corner of my mind. I had spent so long fighting for a future with Vanessa. For a life we could share. But now, I didn't know what I was fighting for anymore. It was a strange feeling, not having a clear goal. For so long, I had been the man who worked tirelessly to provide for her, to make her happy. Now, I was standing in a void, unsure of what to do with the freedom I had fought so hard for. The bitterness from the betrayal still lingered. But more than that, I felt a sense of numbness that I couldn't shake. It was like waking up from a fog, only to realize you'd been stuck in it for so long that you didn't know how to move forward. Then came the phone call. I had been avoiding Vanessa's attempts to reach me. Her calls, her messages, they all went unanswered. I had made my peace with the fact that the woman I had loved, the woman I had given so much to, was gone. But still, the curiosity gnawed at me. What did she want? What could she possibly have to say after everything that had happened? And yet, when her name flashed on my phone screen, I couldn't bring myself to ignore it this time. Marcus, we need to talk. Her voice was strained, almost pleading, as if she was the one who had been wronged. I had heard that tone before. She was trying to play the victim again, trying to manipulate the situation. I should have hung up right then, should have told her that there was nothing left to say. But instead, I found myself listening, despite everything that had happened. I'm not sure what you think we need to talk about, I said, keeping my voice calm, controlled. The court said it all, Vanessa. You don't get to change the facts. I know, she responded quickly, but I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you, Marcus. I just didn't know what else to do. Her words were hollow, rehearsed. They had no weight behind them. No real sincerity. The woman I had known for so many years was gone, replaced by this version of herself that had nothing to offer but empty words. Save it, I said, my voice firm. You had plenty of chances to be honest with me, to make things right. But you chose not to. You chose to lie. To deceive me. You didn't just hurt me, Vanessa. You tore apart everything I believed in. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she had hung up. But then she spoke again, her voice softer this time, more broken. I didn't want to hurt you, Marcus. I just wanted to be happy. And I thought I could find that with Jonathan. But now I see how much I've lost. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I didn't care. How many times had I heard her say something like that before? How many times had I believed her, only to have it thrown back in my face? I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't the man who would forgive her, who would bend over backward to make things work. No, that version of me was dead. The new me? The one sitting here on this phone call, listening to her pathetic excuse for an apology? That man wasn't interested in redemption. Not anymore. You've lost everything, I said, my voice low, almost cold. You took everything from me. And now you're left with nothing. Not even your dignity. Another long silence. The weight of my words hung in the air between us. Vanessa wasn't going to get the last word. She wasn't going to get to spin this into some story where she was the one who had been wronged. Not anymore. Not after everything she had done. I'm done, I said, finally, my voice breaking the silence. This is over, don't call me again. I hung up, staring at the phone in my hand as if it was the last connection to the past. But it wasn't. It wasn't a connection at all. It was the final thread that had tied me to the woman who had betrayed me. And with one simple action, I had cut it. The next few weeks were quiet. I didn't hear from Vanessa again. I didn't hear from anyone, really. But that was fine. For the first time in a long time, I was alone, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It wasn't the freedom I had expected. There was no joy in it, no celebration. It was just peace. The chaos was gone. The noise had stopped, and I was left with a stillness that I hadn't known in years. I started making changes in my life. Little things at first, rearranging the apartment, getting rid of things that reminded me of her. Things I never thought I'd part with, but now I could see them for what they were. Reminders of the lies, the manipulation. I didn't need those memories anymore. I needed something new. Something real. I started to reconnect with people, friends I hadn't talked to in years. Family I had pushed away because I was so focused on making her happy. They were all still there, waiting for me. And for the first time in years, I was able to be myself again. I wasn't the man I had been in that marriage. I wasn't the man who had given everything to someone who never cared enough to give anything back. I was stronger now, more aware, and I was ready to move on. But it wasn't just about moving on, it was about moving forward. I had learned so much about myself in the process. About the kind of man I was. The kind of man I wanted to be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. The future was mine. And no one, not even Vanessa, could take that away from me. In the end, I didn't need her to validate my worth. I had learned the hard way that my value didn't come from her approval. It came from within. And that was something no one could ever take from me. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. She thought she could walk away without consequences, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. The revenge? It was sweeter than I ever imagined. But I never expected what happened after that. Stay tuned to find out how this story ends, because trust me, the last twist will leave you speechless. Make sure to like, comment, and follow for more incredible stories like this one. Sometimes, the hardest lessons in life come from the deepest betrayals. But I learned something crucial: don't sacrifice your self-worth for someone else's approval. Your value doesn't come from how others treat you, especially when they take you for granted. Stand up for yourself. Don't let anyone drain your energy, or make you feel less than what you are. Life's too short to spend it trying to please someone who doesn't appreciate you. If they walk away, let them. Your future is yours to build, and no one can take that away from you.